Thank you all for taking time out this evening to join us. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces in the room. Over the past few days, we've had a very intensive work session. A lot of you participated in our roundtable meetings. And for those of you who didn't, we hope we'll be able to impress you as well. For those of you who did, we hope we'll be able to show you some things that reflect back on what you said to us during the course of this process. What we'll be presenting tonight is sort of the result of a 3-day work session. Everything you see is a bit of a work in progress. It's subject to revision. It's subject to feedback. This is not the be-all, end-all. And I think the other important thing to stress is a lot of what we're going to show you is the exciting part of it tonight. A lot of the practical implementation steps and what happens when and who does what will come after this point in the process when we begin to link together the recommendations with resources, with time frames, and really understanding how that works. Before I jump too far in, I want to thank the folks at the town of Moncks Corner. Jeff Lord, thank you so much for your support. Doug Poland and Sarah Anderson, we appreciate you all coordinating these meetings over the past several days, and we want to thank Mayor Locklear as well for his support over the past several days. This would not have happened without a team effort, and I do want to introduce our team, those that are here, and then I'll recognize those that have not here this evening as well. I'm Tripp Muldrow with Arnett Muldrow and Associates. We're based in Greenville. We do small and medium-sized planning in communities and towns across the country. It's so much easier not talking over the train.
You did a good job.
And it's always nice to work here at home in the Palmetto State. With us, we had Shawn Terpack, who's a graphic designer who was working alongside us. We have Randy Wilson. Randy's with Community Design Solutions out of Columbia, South Carolina. Randy's an architect by training. He's a downtown man by practice, and he also serves as the state architect for the South Carolina Main Street program. We have Calin Owens. Calin's with Alta Planning out of Greenville. He and T. Coker with Alta Planning, and then we also have Blake Sanders with Alta Planning. These guys worked on the wayfinding portion of this, exploring some of the connectivity pieces of the project, and looking at Main Street itself and how it might function in the future so that it could be a bit more pedestrian friendly over time. We also have with us Andy Kalback. Andy is from Maine, the backwoods of Maine. We drag him out every once in a while to come to South Carolina. He's been working in this state for over 20 years on downtown master plans. Andy's looking at development and redevelopment opportunities, and we'll be sharing some of those. And of course, I didn't mention what Randy will be working on, or what he'll be showing tonight. Is before and after renderings of locations and buildings throughout the downtown based on a property owner's workshop that we had on Monday. And then last but not least, we have Beppie LeGrand. Beppie is the director of the South Carolina Main Street program. It's a great pleasure to work with another South Carolina Main Street community, and Beppie makes sure we keep our acts together as we do this work. And then she'll be with you as we sort of move into the implementation phase as well to help work through that based on her experience, vast experience working in cities and towns across South Carolina. So with no further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in. We basically are going to go through 4 components tonight. We're going to talk first about market analysis, some of the market-based part. That's the part where I put you to sleep with numbers, but hopefully I'll make something exciting out of it. And then we'll move into the marketing and identity piece of it. Then I'll be turning it over to other members of the team to talk about the road network, the streets, some of the improvements that could take place to make it a more walkable and pleasant Main Street experience. And then we'll be moving on to development and redevelopment opportunities. And with that, we'll wrap up with questions, comments, and then if for those of you who know anyone who wanted to be here tonight, who was unable to make it, we are recording this presentation and we'll be uploading it so that other people can watch it and see it. And the benefit that those people will have is they don't have to look at us. They'll just see the screen and hear the sound. Without further ado, I'll jump right in. Thanks for changing that animation there, Andy. The market analysis portion of it. Whenever we do a market analysis, one of the things that we try and avoid is talking about a 10-mile radius or a 15-mile radius or a 20-minute drive time. I think this is particularly important for a community like Moncks Corner, where when we get into a 20, 25-minute drive time, we're well into Metro Charleston. And then in the other direction, we're well into great rural areas. And so by working with businesses in downtown, we were able to track customer zip codes and actually determine a snapshot of where customers are coming from in Moncks Corner, which proves very beneficial a number of ways. It allows us to find what the trade area is. It also allows us to look at where visitors are coming, from where the visitors are coming. It was held during October 11th through 19th. 16 businesses in the downtown area participated. During that 7-day period, 8-day period, they recorded 1,817 customer visits, representing 64 unique U.S. zip codes, and not 37 states, it's 7 unique states. I left a 3 on there. 7 unique states passed through the community. We rarely see a place have 37 states in a week. More importantly, where are they from? 48% of the customers, nearly half, reported a Moncks Corner zip code. And that means that this is a downtown, this is a district that very much caters to and takes care of and works with the people who live here right in the Moncks Corner community. The next most significant zip code was Bono with 11%. So that's putting us almost up to the 60% mark. When we combine all the Somerville zip codes together, that represented another 10% of your customer visits. So for those of you who think that Somerville folks don't come here, in fact, they do represent a good portion of the customer visits. Now, I'm going to deflate that notion a little bit with a future slide, but I think from a marketing standpoint, what it indicates to Moncks Corner is that you have a toehold in the Somerville market, and then how do we continue to cultivate that, because it's a growing market and it's one that's going to see ongoing investment and ongoing people moving in over time. Pinopolis, 6%, Goose Creek, 6%, and then you start seeing some of the smaller communities like Cordsville, St. Stephen, Ladson, the rest of Berkeley County, Charleston County. And then your visitors, really the rest of South Carolina, outside of the BCD Tri-County region, represents about 3% of your customers. We have to take into account, and I think it shouldn't come as a surprise to you, that the main street of Moncks Corner, while it does attract some degree of visitors in, some of that seasonal, you're not the kind of downtown like I was in 2 weeks ago, which was Aiken, which is very much a tourism kind of oriented downtown. This is much more of a main street that is catered to local and regional customers. But having said that, over time, this represents an opportunity for you to grow a visitor market as you continue to develop and create new things coming in. This is particularly true when tournaments happen over at the recreation complex, and this will continue to sort of be an evolving thing for you. What's nice about this analysis is it can serve as a baseline for future studies when you look at analyzing who's coming in during a tournament, how is that impacting the businesses, and so forth. The next thing we do is we do customer visits per 1,000. And so what it does is actually correct for the population inside of zip codes. And this is where we actually define what your primary and secondary trade areas are. It's very rare for me to see such incredibly solid breaks in trade area loyalty. Panopolis is actually your most loyal zip code. All 820 of them, you had about an eighth of them show up. So give someone from Panopolis a hug the next time you see them. But what we see here is a really strong break between 133 visits per thousand, of course they don't even have 1,000, down to the 29461 Moncks Corner, 25. These four zip codes, Corsville, Balta, Panopolis, and Moncks Corner, represent your primary trade area. Clear break with your secondary trade area. A dramatic jump from 25 visits per thousand to 6 visits per thousand, or about 7 for Cross, and then it sort of hangs in there for Pineville, St. Stephen, and Jamestown. And then you see this other real strong break again, and Goose Creek becomes the next one, but we go from 6 visits per thousand to 1.6 visits per thousand. And so what it basically means is, and I think you all intuitively would know this, folks who live in this 29445 and who live in these Somerville zip codes, they're more inclined to stay in the area closer to them. They're more inclined to shop where there are more retail opportunities. But if we go back to that pie chart on the prior page, if we eliminated these folks from the equation here in Moncks Corner, that would make a lot more challenging environment for businesses to succeed. And so what it does is it points me in 2 different directions. From a marketing standpoint, we need to have a clear marketing message that's appealing to people who live in Somerville, who live in Goose Creek, who live in those areas that are outlying, to say, why would you turn the other direction than what you're typically used to turning? But what it also says from a local standpoint, and you'll see these numbers in a moment, we have opportunities to retain dollars in this community that are currently leaving the community. And I'll talk about that coming right up. When we look at those 4 zip codes, we are seeing the top 4 zip codes on this page: Panopolis, Corsville, Bono, and Moncks Corner. That population increased by 16% since 2010. That represents 43,000 warm bodies inside those 4 zip codes. That is a pretty dramatic population increase. Indeed, when we put it up next to Goose Creek and Somerville and some of these other zip codes, it's not as robust as we've seen in past years with that kind of growth. But if anyone around here is thinking that's not coming, it is coming. And this is really obvious that that kind of growth is rapidly into this area. It presents a singular opportunity for this community to make a decision about how you want to grow, how you want to evolve, how you want to change, and how downtown is going to play a role amidst growth in the market. Because over the next 5 years, by 2021, that population is going to increase to 47,000, another 9.1% increase. That secondary trade area, the more rural area, St. Stephen, Pineville, some of those other areas, those areas had been in decline in population up until the year 2000, and now they're in growth mode. So if you think Metro Charleston is coming your way, you sense it, you feel it, it's coming this way. And so it presents for you opportunities, but it also presents for you challenges. And how do you mitigate that and look at how do we capture the best of that opportunity without damaging the quality of life, the hometown feel that this community has curated and cultivated over the years. There'll be 1,683 new households in the 4 zip codes by 2021. Of those households, 1,238 will be family households. So if I'm just doing simple math and deducting out, okay, of those new households, let's just say the remainder, that delta between the two, that's about 400 units that are non-family households. That might be a young single, it might be an empty nester that doesn't have kids in the home, It may still be counted as a family household because it's a married couple and that still continue to be a family. Even if you got 1 in every 10 of those, we're looking at 40 to 50 new units of residential development that would be catered to non-families. And that points to an opportunity in downtown to capture some of that in some units that are not your traditional suburban house development. It may be that someone wants to live on the upper floor, or they want to live in a townhouse, or they want to live close to where they can walk. So the market opportunities for residential are very real. The income levels here are almost on par with that of South Carolina. And so you match the state pretty much overall. 47% of the households here earn over $50,000 a year, and 17% of the households earn $100,000 or more. But I need to make an important point. There is, as you know, poverty in this community. 13% of the families here live below the poverty line. And so as we look at things, we've got to recognize that, yes, we want to capture and capitalize on disposable income, but we also have to be cognizant that we have a community here that there are people in need. And so as we look at that, we want to sort of look at both pieces of it. So all this leads to, once we draw this geography, these 4 zip codes, we can look at retail market gap. One of 2 things happens in a retail market gap. Once you draw that geography, when local consumers buy more than they can sell, than stores can sell, that means you're leaking dollars. You're throwing dollars outside the community. When stores sell more than locals can buy, that means you're attracting dollars into the community. Well, Moncks Corner is interesting because it's a mixed bag. Your stores sell $735 million in goods. Consumers spend $703 million in those same store types. And that sounds like, well, we're importing dollars. That looks really good. That's great. We're doing better. We're overperforming in categories. So I put this asterisk right here because your market gain of $32 million is quite deceptive. Once I break it down into the individual categories, and I can see 52 individual retail categories, there's some things that pop right off the page. And this next slide will illustrate. Building equipment, garden supply, all the kind of construction stuff that's retail oriented, you are selling $42 million more than consumers can buy. This is the place people go to get their tractor supply. This is the place to go to get their garden stuff. This is the place people go to do the kind of farm, you know, you're very traditional, sort of farm to market town. But this is the real clincher right here, general merchandise, Walmart. $143 million gain in the general merchandise category. If we eliminated those 2 categories alone, you go from a gain market of $30 million to a leakage market of $250 million every year that you here in these 4 zip codes pack up and send off to Somerville, send off to Goose Creek, send off to Charleston, send off to other places. Now, I'm going to tell you, as a market analyst, that's never going to completely correct for itself. Smaller markets always graduate to bigger markets. So the question then becomes, what piece of this action is realistic to capture into Moncks Corner, and then further hone those numbers to say, what piece of that action is realistic to capture into downtown? And so what we end up doing is doing a capture scenario that is a conservative look. And I always tend to want to be conservative when I'm looking at these numbers. So let me tell you why it's a conservative look. First, I base it on a 10 to 20% capture rate. I'm basically saying, if you're giving up $20 million on something, you're probably only going to get $2 to $4 million back. because people are still going to want to eat at whatever that new restaurant is that opened at wherever, you know, or people are still going to drive to Belk's, you know, at the mall at Northwoods or whatever. And so you're still going to see leakage no matter what. I base it on rather low sales per square foot rates. The reason I do that is the chain stores that are in line and big shopping centers, at Tanger Outlet Mall, at wherever they are, they're doing a pretty high sales per square foot. But when we're working in a downtown, an independent merchant doesn't need to do that kind of, they don't have the overhead. They're not buying that national advertising. They don't need to do that high sales per square foot. Everything I'm looking at here is freezing your market right now. So this is a snapshot. It is not accounting for the growth that we saw coming. So when that growth arrives, these gaps get even bigger and your opportunities get even greater. And then, of course, it does not account for the visitors to the market. Now, granted, 3% right now doesn't seem like a big thing we need to worry about, but as tournaments start to come, as more people come in during certain times of the year when you're having events and activities, visitors will account for this. And we heard repeatedly in our roundtable sessions that one of the secret weapons that Moncks Corner has is the connection between this community and the incredible outdoor resources that are all around you. Whether it's Lake Moultrie, whether it's the Cooper River, whether it's the hiking trails, the Palmetto Trail Gateway, whether it's kayaking, bird watching, hunting, fishing, we know are all big drivers here. And so as we start to account for those, that increases your visitor potential. And there's a good chance that some of these visitors are checking into a hotel in Somerville, coming into here to do their hunting, fishing, boating, whatever it may be, and they're heading back to Somerville at night, and they're eating their dinner there, they're doing their shopping there, they're doing some other things there. So again, conservative. I like being conservative when we look at this, because I don't want to lead you down a, oh, zippity-doo-dah, we're going to be able to get da-da-da, when we need to be realistic about what we can capture for downtown. The first one is restaurants. You're leaving on other people's tables $47 million a year. So if we look at about a 10 to 15% capture rate, we're looking at $4 to $6 million in sales. That equals, as far as independent restaurants concerned, 4 to 6 additional restaurants in this community. That's pretty good. That splits just about 50-50 between full service restaurants where you sit down, they take your order. It doesn't mean it's got a white tablecloth and a candle on it. It just means they're taking your order, you know, and coming to your table. And quick service restaurants where, you know, they're asking you how big the fries are you want with your sandwich. But those 4 to 6, I think, really represent opportunities for downtown, primarily sit down, casual kind of dining, up to some degree of fine dining based on some of your income levels. Specialty food, very interesting, one that we're seeing grow all over the country. You're leaking $6.7 million a year in specialty food. I think you have a chance to grow 2 to 3 specialty food stores or ongoing farmers market expansion. And I think what we've seen as a trend line, and we're seeing evidence of it even in the room, where there are people who will go to the farmer's market, and it won't necessarily, you're not special, soap's not specialty food, I mean, unless you like to eat soap. So, but what we see with farmers markets is there end up being incubators, and businesses will go, farmers will go, they'll see a business, and they'll move from that into a bricks and mortar shop. So I see that as a tremendous opportunity for downtown as we look ahead. The next one is clothing stores. And you all know all too well that you didn't buy everything you're wearing probably in Moncks Corner, South Carolina. Maybe you did, congratulations. But there's a good chance that what you bought was at Kohl's or at Target or somewhere else nearby. You're leaking about $25 million a year. I believe that equals 4 to 5, maybe even more specialty curated clothing stores. It might be additional children's clothing. You do have a children's consignment shop. It may be additional women's clothing. We worked in communities where we see 3 or 4 women's shops clustered together. And so these represent real opportunities. Again, still saying that of that 25 million, you're probably still packing 22 million away and sending it off to other markets in the whole. Finally, sporting goods shops. I think this one is critically important. Whether it's the outfitter that's helping the hunter or the fisherman, or the person who's telling folks where to put in their kayak or where to hike. It even can recognize, too, the families that are moving in here and sort of do double duty and say, well, this is the outdoor section where we're working with the hiker and the fisherman and the hunter, and this may be the section where we're doing the team sports thing. So it could be a little bit of both and. But you're leaking $7 million. I think a really well-curated sporting goods store or outfitter represents an opportunity for the community. These are just a few. I'm going to be crunching the numbers on others and actually turning that into square footage of space. In the end, there is no market indicator that I can find that points Moncks Corner in a negative direction. Everything here is in a forward-moving, positive direction. That's great news from a market standpoint. Trust me, I've worked in Allendale and Barnwell and Dillon, and it's tough to tease out positive market opportunities in places like Dillon, South Carolina, unless you're talking about fireworks stands. So when I see these kind of trends here in Moncks Corner, it points to good things for the future and opportunities for entrepreneurs, for existing businesses to expand. These opportunities rely right now on existing leakage. I think that we've got to be very careful how we phrase things with regard to growth that's happening in some of the suburban areas in Somerville. So the major developments like Cane Bay and the one next to it, whose name is, thank you. If you sit at the Publix at Cane Bay and open up your phone and say navigate to Somerville, it says 10 miles, 15 minutes. You say navigate to Moncks Corner, it says 15 miles and 22 minutes. You can doggone well bet those people turned out of Cane Bay, they're turning left and not right to go to Somerville because it's closer. Now, having said that, that does not mean that that customer will not come here for special occasions. We don't need to conflate that and say that's part of the market that we're looking at. It's part of the market we want to catch a piece of their action. We want to catch some of that, and you're already doing it. So don't lose it. So it points to a marketing strategy. And what's great about these big master developments is you got a bit of a captive audience. And so it can be fairly low entry point to market to these folks and actually determine whether it's yielding results. I worked in a community in Virginia several years ago that they specifically targeted new neighborhoods, and then they would do a zip code survey of customers, and they could watch those neighborhoods show up in their shops after they did that targeted marketing. And then finally, you have room to grow in your tourism, and we've already talked about that. Pivotal to that is making the connection between the incredible setting of Moncks Corner itself and the fantastic landscape that surrounds you and all the activities that happen there. So from there, I'm going to switch because a lot of this data starts to inform some of the branding and marketing direction for the community. As we look at this, we like to look at a lot of different things. We look at things like typeface. One of the things we wanted to look at here in Moncks Corner was a primary typeface that was bold, it was solid, it represented strength. We heard it in the public meeting that people said that this is a reliable community. This is a community that is, you can count on. It's a community with spirit, and it's a community that's strong. Secondary, a little bit more playful, a little bit more outdoorsy, a little bit more giving us sort of, looking at combining some real straight, bold with a little bit more fanciful. We're also looking at things like color scheme. We're looking at things like tagline. We're looking at things like logo design. So what I'm going to go into next is what we call your brand statement or your position statement. And so I'm going to take off my analytical hat and put on my English major hat, and I'm going to go through a narrative that we've worked up that tees up what we hope you will agree can be an appropriate tagline for Moncks Corner. And I'm going to wait until the whistle goes by.
It is quite a lead-in, though.
Okay. All right. I can talk over train, I just can't talk over a whistle. It says, we are Moncks Corner. Moncks Corner has been a crossroads for commerce since the colonial days of South Carolina. Transportation up the Cooper River and roads to interior communities made us thrive by connecting the low country to the back country of the colony. These connections placed Moncks Corner in the crosshairs of battles throughout the Revolutionary War. Local patriots, led by Francis Marion, the swamp fox of the Revolution, would fight British forces throughout the war, ultimately leading to Patriot victory in Yorktown. After the Revolution, Moncks Corner continued to thrive as a place of commerce. The old Santee Canal gave way to the railroad, creating a bustling downtown while preserving the town's important role in facilitating transportation throughout South Carolina. It was here that Santee Cooper built an energy empire that has powered South Carolina from the Great Depression to this day. The result is stunning Lake Moultrie that abuts Moncks Corner, offering recreational amenities unmatched in other communities in this state. Moncks Corner has been a crossroads for commerce. Nope, skip that one. I already said that. Today, we're a place where our relationship to the outdoors is unrivaled. Hunting, fishing, hiking, kayaking, and horseback riding abound in the forests, lakes, and streams that surround us. It is this stunning setting, this true low country feel, that defines us. Today, we remain a tight-knit community. We rally around our high school. We celebrate the seasons and holidays with parades and celebrations. We have the vision to build a recreation complex in the heart of downtown that brings people together. As we look to the future, we strive to maintain the feel that makes us unique. We're the embodiment of the low country way of life, relaxed, comfortable, and connected to our stunning setting. We maintain our hometown feel, friendly, welcoming, and warm. We are Moncks Corner. We encourage you to discover our history, explore our outdoors, and experience the downtown reinventing itself. We invite you to reconnect with what it means to be a true community. Dear Moncks Corner, South Carolina, the Low Country's hometown. So this idea of, amidst this low country, this wonderful setting that's known all over the United States, we're seeing dramatic change. We're seeing communities become suburbanized and disappear. We're seeing small towns wiped off the map. But through all that change, Moncks Corner has maintained that small town feel, that spirit, that rally. You're very much a low country community, and you're very much a hometown. And so as we look at this, we began to explore how might we express that in visual terms. What we wanted to do, we looked around at the competition. The go-to in this region, is let's put a live oak on it and we're good to go. And I'm a South Carolinian, so I'm used to, anywhere in the state, if we can't figure out what to do in South Carolina, we put a palmetto tree on it and doggone it, we can head on out of town, we're good to go. So what we wanted to do is differentiate a little bit between Moncks Corner and some of the competition, some of the other communities that are around. We wanted to capture this idea that this is a crossroads, that it is a place, it's a corner. It actually was a corner that started the whole thing. And so what you see in this logo is 4 M's, and they come together and they create corners. And then the center is sort of this centerpiece with the bold typeface and the Low Country's hometown beneath it. We want to make sure this kind of thing works as we look at it in single color, as we look at it with other colors in our palette. We also want to look at it as it works with downtown, showing how that typeface may reverse. Show how this might work with Corner Renaissance, which is your Main Street program, your organization. And I will go back. If you see a quilt pattern in there, it wasn't on purpose, but it's okay if you do, because there's sort of that down-home feel in there. We look at things like your parks and recreation, where we take the corner and we turn it into a home base, but we do put the tree in it, because parks are both passive and active. Your farmer's market, where the corner can be sort of a basket that's holding the food, that's holding the things here. We show it as potential banners to say, welcome to this place. You all know all too well that if you're driving 17 or 52, identifying where Main Street is, you have to be a local to sort of know where to make that turn. And believe me, after being here 3 days, I've still driven past it several times. And then also looking at wayfinding. Do you want to touch base on that? Okay. We must have it in 2 spots. And then looking at marketing pieces. And so one of the neat things about the Low Country's hometown is we can turn this into a whole marketing strategy, where we take those 2 words, we separate them apart, and then we use them as modifiers. So Low Country scenery, hometown feel. Low Country cuisine, hometown service. Yeah, you know where that's from. Low Country history, hometown charm. Low Country setting, hometown champs. Low Country style, hometown comfort. So all these become ways to communicate with people who live here about what is available to be offered. But what this also does in communities like Goose Creek and Somerville and Cane Bay is say, you need a break from the hustle and bustle, why don't you come to the place where you're going to get treated well. The service is going to be good. It's going to be friendly. It's going to be nice. It's going to be relaxed. Then we show ideas on how this could be implemented in material, like shopping bags. And again, the blue and the gold, we know how we struggle with the right blue and the right gold. And part of that was actually picking sort of a South Carolina blue and a lighter blue to sort of say, all right, we just got some blues in here. Things, t-shirts that you would wear instead of use to wash your car with. Ball caps that talk about the Low Country's hometown. Even the idea that you could wear it as jewelry, the symbol of your community. And we're actually working in a place in Alabama where the local jeweler did silver jewelry with their logo on it. And then taking it to the more practical aspects with fleet livery on the cars and the trucks that serve people here at Moncks Corner. So these are sort of the beginnings of the branding concepts as we start to look at how we tell the story of what this community is about. With that, I'm going to kick it over to T, who's going to talk about the streetscape portion.
Right. Thanks, Tripp. All right, so Tripp set the stage, right? Through the market analysis, through the marketing and branding. We have a direction, we have some goals, we know conceptually where we want to go, who we are. And I'm here to actually talk about that physical platform, that physical infrastructure that's going to create a sense of place, a platform for growth and development in your downtown. So what I'd like to do is basically take you on a tour of downtown, okay? So for the purposes of this project, we're looking basically at East Main Street. So starting at 17 and going all the way out to 52. So that's our study corridor. And so what I'd like to do is walk you through essentially a tour of that. There we go. Hopefully I didn't hit it twice. Okay, so here we are, just to orient you. We're headed east. This is 17 here, and we're moving east onto Main Street. The Baptist Church is over here. The old school is to our right. You just can't see that. And so here we are at that intersection facing east. So one of the issues here is that this is, or it should be, your gateway into downtown. But there is zero sense of arrival. There's zero sense of place. You know, I'll be honest with you. My folks have a beach place in North Litchfield, and my wife and I, we've gone through Moncks Corner a lot, but we've never been downtown together. And it's because I didn't know that there was a downtown there, right? So that's a problem. We need to look at that problem. And so one of our solutions is to essentially create this sense of place of arrival, of looking at some of our infrastructure as far as street lights. I know that DOT is engineering this. It's going to look a little bit different than this, but one of the things that DOT is going to do is remove a lot of those overhead lines. So they're going to be clearing up some of that clutter. It's also an opportunity to take a good hard look at signage. We didn't have a chance to do it for the purposes of this presentation, but this is one of the locations for your downtown or district gateway. So this is where we want to jump and scream and wave our arms and say, welcome to downtown, right? So you see here we've got bike lanes that go on both sides of Main Street. You see that we've got, these are high visibility pedestrian crosswalks. In our mind, someone who is a student at Berkeley High School should be able to walk or ride their bike safely from the high school into downtown, out to the rec center, and then beyond, and maybe all the way out to the Old Santee Canal Park. So that's really kind of what we're imagining here. Moving on eastward, here we have the one mid-block crossing that you have on Main Street. This is across from the Baptist Church. I don't know, has anyone ever crossed Main Street here? If you cross here, there's something really funky about it, and it's that these don't align, right? So what you have right here, this is a line that these two lines, they match up perfectly on the north side, but if you cross it here, you actually have to take a little dog leg onto the crosswalk here. And so that's a minor detail. That's kind of an oops that someone had at the end of the day. It must have been a Friday afternoon when this got struck. But when we look at this, all of our recommendations do not involve doing anything with stormwater, do not involve doing anything beyond the curb. So we're looking simply at the roadway itself. It's not to bore you with details because we don't have a lot of time, but it's 38 feet wide. You have 2 lanes of traffic. That's absurd. That's a lot of width for 2 cars. We could drive down this stretch at 45 miles an hour and feel comfortable. Do we want folks to be walking or to be driving 45 miles an hour down the stretch when we have children, we have elderly folks, we have someone in a wheelchair who's trying to make this dog leg up the ramp onto the sidewalk? I'm serious. So we need to think about ways to beautify the area, highlight the corridor, really show it off as part of downtown with a real sense of place, but we also want to make it safe for those folks who are 8 years old and 80 years old and everyone between. So what we have here is a concept where we have bike lanes that continue on both sides of East Main Street. We have a landscape median right here. Do y'all have a garden club? You do. This is a perfect garden club project. We have, and what this also does is it gives us a protected space, a buffer for the family that's crossing the street, for the elderly person crossing the street. This is also a high visibility crosswalk where instead of just 2 lines, you have perpendicular lines all the way across the street. You also have some signage here indicating that it is a pedestrian crosswalk, that the pedestrian does have the right of way in this particular scenario. Now what we imagine is this treatment that you see right here continuing east, down East Main, basically until you get to Unity Park. When you get to Unity Park, you have parallel parking, you have on-street parking, and so you can't do, there's just not enough space to do bike lanes with parallel parking. So we won't see parallel parking, or we won't see bike lanes once we get to Unity Park. But on the other side of 17, out of 52, all the way into the recreation complex, we're going to see a very similar treatment. And there may be a couple places where a mid-block crossing is appropriate. Yes, sir.
That's all parallel parking right there.
No, sir. Well, in this,
Yes, it is.
currently it
That's
is,
the
but
church on both sides
that's right.
is parallel parking.
Currently it is, but what we're showing here is the parallel parking is being removed along this stretch. Yes, sir. Just to clarify. Okay, so as we move east onto Main Street, we have Unity Park that's just off of the picture here. We've got the rec complex, which is just out of the map on the right side. So basically, what we have here is Railroad Avenue out to the coffee shop. And so we're showing two mid-block crossings downtown. I was the person who went around with Sarah to deliver all the zip code surveys that Tripp analyzed. And we just, to cross Main Street, you just walk out and you just hope that one car and then another car is going to stop. You just take a chance, you roll the dice. And so, personally, I said, all right, Sarah, we need to fix this. So we've got two mid-block crossings here. This is at the corner of PNC Bank. Here we are at the depot. One of the things you'll see in a rendering in just a second is that we've got bulb outs. We have 6 bulb outs. It's going to provide landscaping and shade. It's going to shorten the distance that a pedestrian has to cross, to get safely across Main Street. It's also going to formalize our on-street parking. Instead of just being able to just pull your car up wherever, we're actually going to have some paint that's going to denote where cars should park. So even though in theory you're losing some parking space, when you actually get around to creating the actual spaces, you're really not going to lose much, if anything. Additionally, we're going to be creating a ton of other parking opportunities that Andy will talk about in just a few minutes. One other thing we'll be doing is literally just outside our door where you have pavement, we're going to have a sidewalk, a bulb out that really formalizes that pedestrian connection across the railroad track. You can't put a sidewalk over the railroad track, but you can use paint to stripe it. So we'll have pedestrian connections on the north and south side on Main Street, crossing over the railroad tracks. And then once you cross the tracks on this side, we'll have a bulb out where, you know, if we were to just drive across the tracks, you could turn right as soon as you cross over the tracks. You know, you're going to be driving over paint, but I saw 2 people do it yesterday. It's dangerous for families, for seniors, for anyone really who's out walking, because you don't expect to get hit by a car right here when you're 6 feet inside the painted area. So we're going to formalize that. We're going to clean it up. Andy's going to talk a little bit more about a specific plan for Railroad Avenue. But I want to show you one rendering. So imagine that you're standing right about here. So you're looking east, you're looking west on Main Street, and you're looking at all of what was appearing here with these new mid-block crossings. So here we are, here's PNC Bank. Got your Greasy Road right here, and we've got Factory Street right here. So we're looking west, and so what is here? There's a few things going on. Got the titles of the crosswalk. Got your vowels out here. Street trees. He's been lining landscaping. I told you about bike lanes. Share. Basically, just a reminder that bikes have a right on Main Street as well. We want Main Street to be a place for people, not just a place for cars, but a place for people. A few other things. We've used the side of this building as the perfect canvas for a mural. It could look like this, it could look like anything for that matter. But it shows those off the brand identity. We've also formalized the parking, the on-street parking on Factory Street. So for all of some of the spaces that you lose here, you pick some up over here, as well as some other places you can't see in this photo. Moving on into Railroad Avenue, I want to turn it over to Andy for a few minutes before we bounce back to me.
And I'm actually going to back up one slide. The other part of this that this starts to do within the downtown is it's starting to build the destination, that icon that really is Moncks Corner. And as we looked at that, one of the other areas we were tasked at trying to carry that through was Railroad Avenue, which obviously we were just talking about a section right here. East Main is at the top. Sorry, I'm blocking folks. Altman is at the bottom, and Railroad is here. To make it even simpler, Railroad Street's right out there. I'm sure all of you know that. You know, how do we improve the attractiveness? How do we make it more of a destination? How do we start to talk about pulling people from the park, the recreation center, through, down along Railroad, and then ultimately into downtown and even into the park over here? One of those opportunities is, this is a great street. It's not a state highway. We can utilize this for festivals, events. We can look at areas. There's currently diagonal head-end parking along the top that can be utilized for tents. You can close off sections and things like that just to set the street up and start to build that tone, animate it, and get the excitement in it. Some very basic things that how we pull that off, you know, that starts to build pedestrian and foot traffic. There's some parking delineation we can hint to that I'm going to show you in a minute. Landscape always is good. Landscape, you can landscape forever, but it's always helping to build that environment. And then we continue to help to encourage people to animate and energize their business storefronts, you know, and they're very simple things that we'll touch on here in the next slide. What does that translate to? Currently, like I said, there are some diagonal head-in parking spaces along the north end of the street. What we'd like to see here is, one, let's go ahead and stripe and delineate them clearly so people know where to park. I, for one, when I don't have stripes, I park everywhere. I've been in downtowns where you're supposed to park diagonally and people park like this. So it gets the point across, and ultimately we want a parking problem. Parking problem relates to, there are a lot of people downtown, there are a lot of people spending money, and there are a lot of people staying, and that's a good problem to have. Extending that notion, there's the lower end of the Railroad Ave where we can implement some further parking as needed as it needs to come online, and again, it's the same treatment that is currently along the north side of the street. And again, cutting some areas in that we can implement some large shade trees to provide some relief, some beautification, those sort of details. Simple landscape treatment. We see this a lot in downtowns that have railroad lines that go through there. It's as simple as a hedge or a hedgerow, shrub treatment. All it is a low sort of space deterrent from the train. It just has a feeling to it and a separation that it creates that just makes it a little bit more comfortable. And there's certainly ways that we can accent the landscape. You know, T talked about this corner and how we can resolve that and tighten it up a little bit, and we can introduce another layer of landscape that makes it just more eye-appealing. The other side of that is, obviously, we've got the new parking lot that is the newer parking lot is here, wayfinding signage, getting people to know where the parking is. I mean, right now, I wouldn't have known that that was a city parking lot or a public parking facility. We can incorporate the wayfinding into that, pull people off Main Street and get them into where they belong. A lot of times we like to use the word legibility. It's not that it's not that the parking isn't there, it's just not clear to people to go where it belongs. And I'm going to touch on this too. Given, T alluded to the dimension on particularly East Main Street, it's a narrow right-of-way, which means building to building, we only have limited space. By the time you put the car lanes in, because cars take up X amount of space, and you add parking, you have even less space then for sidewalks. It is what it is. We can't move buildings back 20 feet. That would be just not possible. My kids love to do that. They think they're in Lego land. What we can do, though, is start to look at other areas to do things that we would typically do at storefronts, particularly restaurants, outdoor dining. There are a lot of unique little niches and alleys throughout the downtown that serve as places to capture those and animate them, and start to move things like outdoor dining within those spaces. You know, you can add greenery, lighting, you know, shade. This is a small alleyway. I believe that one is in Greenville. This is another one where It's just lighting, some color, some canopies, again, greenery. In many cases, buildings will even oftentimes pop a door through it if it doesn't already exist to start to animate those areas. And taking that a step further, even if it's not a restaurant or an active use, just greenery and landscaping and a simple arch feature that starts to set that tone and that quality of space. There's even some benches and seating in there. Lighting obviously goes a long way. It makes it exciting, particularly at night. Another overhead feature that starts to set that tone.
Okay, so you've already seen some of the branding, obviously, and you've seen a couple of these slides with wayfinding signage. So I talked about setting the stage, right? Focusing on the gateways on either end of East Main. Talked about the streetscape. Well, it's not enough just to put signs at either end. We need to think comprehensively about the town. And so I'm working up a full-fledged wayfinding plan for the town that incorporates a variety of sign types. Some are intended for motorists, some are intended for pedestrians. We have 3 kiosks to be located on East Main Street. We have our downtown district sign. We have our community-wide gateway sign. And then we have a series of, right now we have 36 different signs, Trailblazer directional signs that are basically these that have between 1 to 3 destinations with a directional arrow indicating to the motorist that, hey, there's something cool and interesting this way. So we want people to know that downtown exists. We want people to know that some of your other attractions exist. Old Santee Canal Park, with Little David, with all the programming for kids, with the Berkeley Museum. We want folks to know about these places. We want them to be able to get there. We want to curate that experience. And I'd be willing to bet you that for those of you who are residents, there are probably a number of your friends and neighbors, maybe your kids or grandkids, who've never been to some of the parks, to some of the facilities that you have here in town. And so we want to be able to cultivate pride of place. We want to be able to celebrate the assets and amenities that you have. We want to make sure that people can enjoy them, that they can safely and quickly and easily get there. And then when they get there, and especially when the there is downtown, we want to get them parked, we want to get them out of their car, and then we want them to walk around downtown, enjoy our parks, enjoy our streetscape. And for the business owners in here, we want them to spend money. So ultimately, there's an economic development angle to wayfinding. So it's all about celebrating what you have, calling attention to it, thinking strategically about intercepting automotive traffic, converting the motorist into a pedestrian, because cars don't spend money, people spend money. We want people to spend money in Moncks Corner, and more specifically, we want them to spend money downtown. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Andy to talk about some development opportunities for downtown Moncks Corner.
Yeah, so obviously earlier Tripp alluded to the numbers and some of the aspects and the opportunities that exist and what he's discovered. And what that starts to translate to are really development opportunities, particularly in a community that obviously is growing. And what that simplifies into is things that can go into the ground, literally. We delved into really 4 distinct areas to kind of focus on for tonight, to start to create some initial ideas and thought generation on. Obviously, we talked about Railroad Avenue already. The other 3 in order, the parking lot right out here, Heart to Hearts parking, Unity Park area, and then the area around the recreation complex between Pegler and East Main. And we'll start with the Heart to Heart parking area, and this is what I like to call more of a light touch. It's more of an aesthetic, cosmetic thing. It's not terribly complicated, with minimal investment. This is the center of that parking area right now, which is right outdoors here, and it's stood the test of time, but it's also not gone through the evolution of what people need for parking modern day. This is literally the original arrangement that was when Bilo was there. So you've got some redundant areas, like there are literally 1, 2, 3, 4. There's several drive outlets. The bottom line is we can revisit this to create a safer, more fluid, and better pedestrian and vehicular circulation within there, which also then translates to opportunities to introduce some landscape and some greenery define some edges and create a street edge, which is more eye appealing and actually functions better. And not only that, you actually have the opportunity here to pick up a few more parking spaces. So what that translates to in very simple form is really all we're doing is relaying out that internal parking area to go 90-degree head-in parking. You restripe it, you begin to start to cut in these tree islands, as we like to call them, so you get some shade in, get some greenery in. You define the edges by introducing those islands, and the perfect example is the bank right across the way here. That allows us to create the walk connections that can connect the park back to the depot. It allows us to introduce a walk along Heatley Street. And ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, we've suddenly not only created a more fluid parking area and better served, it's more beautiful, and we've increased some parking spaces just because we've gone to a different geometry. In order to help out Heart to Heart, we've put a little drop-off lane in here so that when they've got services in, you've got people that can drop off and then relocate spaces. We'd love to see this as a shared facility. Obviously, it's owned and private ownership. Hopefully that would work out. It's a great resource. There's a lot of non-conflicting times when it can be utilized, and it's a great resource to have downtown. As we move on, the second site, actually this will be the third site. This is the East Main site. Obviously, the recreation center here to the north. We're standing back here somewhere, and the tracks are kind of right in through here. Currently, it's vacant land in this particular section, but the bottom line is we like to look at things holistically to see what they mean as they marry together. If you look at things piece by piece, a lot of times the overall plan just doesn't work as well. Tripp mentioned, the numbers, which obviously leads to new development. The big part of this that really radiated amongst us was the proximity to downtown. Downtown is right here. These sites offer a tremendous opportunity to bring people indoors and bring people into downtown right away. It's walkable, obviously, and then, as we alluded to, the bike and walkway connections would certainly be made to this site as well. So we've developed a plan. This is the entry into the regional recreation center. We've introduced the building here that would anchor the corner, that starts to set the tone heading into the recreation center. But not only that, as it starts to anchor this sort of downtown area as an overall area, we've left a small green space that, depending on how the program and function of that building would work, provides a spill-out space for outdoor activities. If in fact it became a retail or restaurant use, obviously you have opportunities to pull tables and chairs outside. Introduce parking on site, obviously, to balance that square footage and that development. Then between that site and then another site I'll talk about here in a minute is a primary location to pull the bike lane through, which just by chance works with how the development of these two work together, which is why I mentioned earlier, a lot of times it makes sense to pull things and look at things holistically rather than site by site. We can pull our bike access and pull people from that route right into the park here, and lo and behold, that's where the potential future splash pad will be landing in the park. The more exciting part of this is we see an opportunity to introduce a hotel site in downtown. This is a small, not a huge hotel. It's about 75 to 80 rooms. It immediately puts people that are in town for recreation uses into a place that they can stay, remain here, go to dinner, walk downtown, spend their money, maybe even make an entire weekend out of it, and utilize a resource that is in need in Moncks Corner. We've got some surface parking. It parks itself out. It's pretty self-sustaining and pretty self-explanatory. Go
back a slide. Okay, so we have an awesome project that already exists, the Recreation Center, our complex. It's growing. We've got a splash pad coming. We're having tournaments. We're having visitors. We're staying in the Moncks Corner Inn, 100% occupancy the last 2 nights. There's opportunity for a hotel. We've got an opportunity for a community center. One of the opportunities that Tripp mentioned earlier was for sporting goods or an outfitter. Just so it happens that on the other side of this path, this greenway, is a relatively large undeveloped parcel. So let's take a big step back. So here we are in Moncks Corner. This is Bono up here. What you see in red is something called the Palmetto Trail. It's a trail that's under various stages of completion that runs from all on the coast all the way up to Walhalla. And so communities across the state are connecting to the Palmetto Trail. We recently worked with Walhalla. We created a downtown trailhead as well as a connector, a feasibility study for a connector to the official trailhead for the Palmetto Trail. About 5 miles away from downtown, from where we're sitting right now, is a trailhead near Bono. And so what we see here in the screen is a trail spur connector that would run from Bono, all the way down into the recreation complex. And then it would literally just cross the street and boom, you're in downtown, right? So how cool would that be? The other thing to think about, and this gets way outside of downtown as well, thinking long term about connectivity for people who are walking, biking, connections to Somerville and connections to Goose Creek. So 17 and 52. If you go down 52 and you get to Cane Bay, when you get to Goose Creek, you see that they have greenways, that they have shared use paths that go on the west side of 52. You know, if you go down to Goose Creek, I guarantee you right now there's probably 100 people on the hiker-biker trail going around their town hall. We want to think big, and we want to think about connecting, not just, you know, let's go around the lake near our town hall. We want to think about connecting our communities in Berkeley County. So think about this. Think about where we are right now in the larger scheme of things, in the larger regional picture of connectivity. Now let's just zoom right back into downtown. So here we are, the hotel sites here, the community centers here, the rec complexes up here. We're across the street. We've got this really cool undeveloped site. Could be some wetlands issues, but it doesn't look like it. But wouldn't it be a cool place for our outfitter? And I wonder what the outfitter could sell. You know, maybe they could sell cleats. Maybe they could sell bathing suits for kids at the splash pad. They certainly could sell outdoor equipment to the folks who want to go out on Lake Moultrie, for the hikers and bikers who want to take that trail spur connector up to the Palmetto Trail, for the folks who want to go camping. You know, they could have a pond where you can go out and test a boat. Maybe they sell, you know, fishing line, you know, and rods and reels. You could go out there, you could cordon off a section of it, and you could test out a line, maybe a fly fishing. The sky's the limit. But this is an example of taking available data, very dry, boring market data, taking an asset that you already have, a tremendous asset with the recreation complex, adding a few other ingredients in, and you wind up with a really cool creative business concept. So I'm going to turn it back over to the Reverend.
All right, so before we talk about your buildings and your downtown architecture, I want you to understand why these particular buildings and these architectural assets are so important. And you're going to figure it out through crowd participation. Okay, so all I want you to do is to turn and face somebody that you're sitting next to and repeat after me. Just go ahead and look at somebody. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. No. I want you to say this with enthusiasm. I'm so glad you don't look like me. You don't look like me. All right. Now I am too, and that has a lot of pertinence to your downtown architectural buildings and assets, because the buildings that reside on Highway 17 or on Highway 52, I can find those exact same buildings, those exact same restaurants, those exact same stores in dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of communities all across America. But there is only one place on the planet that the assemblage of historic architectural structures that exist in downtown Moncks Corner exist, and that is Moncks Corner. They simply don't exist anywhere else on the planet. And therefore and thusly, it is imperative that we treat them with the highest level of care. And so for the next 5 or 6 buildings, I'm going to take a look at some potential enhancements that hopefully build upon their unique characteristics. Okay? And so I had the privilege of meeting with 6 property owners, and I want to thank you for the time that you took to meet with me to take a look at your buildings. I think most people recognize this as the former or old Western Alta store, and Mr. Grady allowed me to take a look at this building. It currently exists, now it actually has a paint job, but it used to exist in this condition. And one of the things that's a hardship about it in this condition is the fact that it's painted white. Historically, there were only 3 types of buildings that were painted white. Those were civic buildings, churches, and certain residential uses, okay? But other than that, you would almost never find a commercial structure painted white. And the reason is because it's such a glaring color. And so in the first iteration, we toned it down with sort of this kind of a pale gray-green. And this is what I would call a slightly more contemporary expression, if you will, of a very simple commercial building. So here we're using a metal canopy, can lights, and in this instance, what we decided to do, instead of fighting this recess in the stucco in the brick, is we actually embedded the sign into that location. The next one is a slightly more, shall we say, southern kind of historic approach, where we kind of distress the sign a little bit, and right now I can see all the ladies. Is a ladies' boutique going in there? I hope so, for your sake. As Tripp alluded to, it certainly is a market demand, and it would certainly be a good use. But here, just kind of a softer, gentler approach, distress sign, and a striped awning in this instance. Mr. Weathers allowed me to look at his building that currently houses Tiny Tots on the left and the Sela Dance Studio on the right. I'm so sorry that Hurricane Matthew took your awning away.
Me too.
Yeah, I bet you are. And so that's certainly something that we're going to show in the next iteration of this illustration. But one of Mr. Weathers' stated goals was, I just want this building to be brighter, and just to kind of make a bolder statement. To the right, Betty Crawford's buildings exist, and they're really wonderful, handsome, well designed. And so we wanted a similar theme, but a slightly brighter kind of gesture. And so here, picking up on the colors of the signs, blue on the left, the pink on the right, we're going to introduce blue on the left, pink on the right, pink doors, blue doors. And in this case, we decided to go, well, I decided for you, to go with the blue and a white striped on it. And I looked at the pink and white, and I felt like it was a little bit, the red kind of blended in too much with the brick, whereas the blue kind of stands out a little bit. And then borrowing from Betty's good gesture over here on the right, painting what we call, the technical term is the bulkhead brick, or the utilitarian brick, painting it a lighter color so that we just kind of brighten up and highlight all of the storefront framed elements. We also added these gooseneck lights. The reason they're called goosenecks is the shape. It looks like a gooseneck coming out from the wall. And while during the daytime they don't really make much of an impression, at night they make a very, very big impression. There's just sort of this wash of light that would go down not only on the signs, but also just the buildings themselves. And then finally, if you're paying attention, very subtle gesture over here that Andy alluded to pertaining to Railroad Avenue. You have a very unique situation in downtown Moncks Corner, in the sense that in a lot of your downtown historic cores, all of the buildings were slammed right up beside each other. Whereas in many instances, you have a few buildings in a gap, in some cases a building a gap. And so instead of viewing those as just gaps, let's celebrate those as alleys. And we heard a lot of citizens that said, let's take advantage of these. Yes, we understand they're in private ownership, but encourage private owners, or even some that are accessing public parking resources, then maybe it could be a public-private partnership where these enhancements take place. And while this only shows in this iteration some string lights, I can easily see some art suspended from the sides of these walls. Here's some other gestures that we've done, others have done in other places. I really love that treatment with the colorful umbrellas that kind of create an implied canopy or ceiling. Andy showed you this one from Lake City. I love these sort of interactive pieces. You put up a chalkboard and say, before I die, I want to, or whatever. And again, it's such a nominal investment to string those Edison or those Christmas lights, and yet it makes it such an impression at night. This is an alley that one of Andy's colleagues and I designed. Well, we didn't design, we did the initial renderings, and it was just completed in Gulfport, Mississippi. And what I really love about this, it's still pretty darn raw, right? I mean, you don't have to make these things too fussy and too heavy-handed from a design motif. Matter of fact, in some ways, I kind of like that all this stuff still kind of hangs out there for view. We still recognize that it's a public service alley. but you have just enough design touches to make it useful. Obviously, you see the string lights again, in this case, a little arch. I love the fact that you're going to see in just a second, pay attention right here. Obviously, it's a bench, but that is nothing more than another weatherhead like this, but an artist took paint and brush to it, and all of a sudden, it's a nice little gesture. And so you've got all kinds of opportunities to do this in downtown Moncks Corner, whether it's along Railroad Avenue, as Andy alluded to, or along Main Street, where I'm currently focused. I love Jesse and Gabriel's house and this little ancillary building, which could house their commercial venture. And in my mind's eye, when I saw this particular building, it evoked memories of me of either rural schoolhouses, rural community centers, or particularly the old commercial rural stores. And so with that in mind, I first want to do a little bit of historic research to find out what were the typical sort of signage types. Now, I don't know who the Coca-Cola salesman was, but they did a great job. Because it seems like on virtually every historic rural country store, there was a Coca-Cola thing slapped up. But I know these guys well enough to know they don't want to promote Coca-Cola. And so, but what I did learn was, look, the sub-panel was almost always a very simple white porcelain metal panel with a very simple black text. And in many cases, a sans serif, just a straight up Helvetica. The only exception is sometimes, and I really love these gestures, is they would paint it right on the side. And so since we have a husband-wife dual business, we decided to take each approach. In case you don't know, they drew straws. No, I'm just kidding. I have no idea how they arrived at it. But Jesse's business would be on the right side as we're facing it, and Gabriel's would be on the left. Gabriel's business is called Moncks Corner. And so again, so he receives kind of that traditional, just metal panel with a straight up black text. And then Jesse's, we're going to paint right on the siding and borrow, from your color palette, the name of the business, the icon, and the subtitle. It's your call whether or not you want to add the little goose neck light. I personally think it would be a nice little touch. Obviously painted it red because of the appearance of the red metal ceilings. And then, of course, take advantage of this existing sign pole to put the hanging signs in for the automobile or the pedestrian walking by. And, of course, we're going to add the sidewalk to make it easy to access the porch from the sidewalk. We did want to look at one iteration whereby we would introduce what in a traditional storefront would be the storefront window. Obviously, in a more residential form, it's going to look more like a traditional window, but we're going to place it in the center bay in case they wanted to display products, in which case simply, Jesse, your logo would be displaced over to the right side. Next, we have Cindy. Allow me to look at her. I love the combinations of barbecue and barbershop. I mean, two B's that feature two things I love, okay? Well, never mind. I'll correct the second joke in a second. So in its current situation, nothing offensive about these buildings whatsoever. Over time, this color has faded a bit, so it almost has sort of a pink coral look. Again, that's no problem with that. Just when I think of barbecue, I think of manly man meat, okay? And so the notion of pink, maybe we want to change the color a little bit and saturate it a little bit. And then over here on the barbershop, the yellow, again, not offensive whatsoever, but I think, what three colors come to mind when you think of a barbershop? Red, white, and blue. Red, white, and blue. There you go. And so that's what we're gonna strive for here. So on the left, just going to saturate that color a bit more. Whoop, good. So, okay. So it's a nice saturated color. I kind of like this more rustic look where you have a metal roof with the brackets. I don't know, it kind of makes it feel a little bit more Western, for lack of a better word, country, whatever. And of course, this is borrowed right off of your koozies. I mean, that's where that sign came from, and I particularly like it. For the barbershop, again, we would go with a red, white, and blue. And again, here's my other joke. If you don't like Tripp's tagline, which I love, by the way, do y'all like the Low Country's Uptown? I love that. Yeah. But if you don't go with that, you can also go with barbershop capital of the world. Yeah. I mean, you guys have got more barbershops you can shake a stick at. But again, so here the motif is simply go with the red, white, and blue. Feature the barbershop. This is what we call a wainscot. It's just a saturated darker color at the base of the building to help, if you will, visually anchor the building to the street. So, Cindy, I hope you like that. I love this one. Roger and Kim. What did I do wrong? Oh, wait, oh, sir. Okay. Yes, sir.
Randy, Ms. Man, a barbecue shop with the 4 players up there. Came out from the custom sport back in the early 60s.
Sure.
And I guess that was just their trademark.
Right.
I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love their sign. It's kind of faded, and so if they want to replicate that and go that back, I just borrowed it from the koozie because I liked. I don't know. There was something that was kind of cool about that logo. I mean, who doesn't like a pig playing a saxophone? I mean, you know.
I like the color.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so the print shop, we're Kim and Roger. Did I get your names right? Okay, good. So I want to say something really important about your downtown architecture related to this building, but it's a general statement. And the statement would be this: don't fight the architecture, okay? Let each building kind of be true to itself. Because can we all agree, this is a humble building. I hope that doesn't offend you. I mean, it's a humble building. It was designed as a garage, a dry cleaner. And so let's don't try to make it something it's not. I mean, you can make it look different in something it's not. It's just going to be expensive, and it won't quite be real. I mean, I think there's plenty to celebrate in this building, and hopefully I'm going to illustrate it in just a second. But it's a print shop as a use, and so to me, I want to celebrate that use. One other important thing to understand, and I think you intuitively understand, do you understand there's kind of a difference in the architectural character in West Main versus the architecture in East Main? Okay? And so don't try to make the buildings in West Main look like East Main and vice versa, okay? Because it would just be a mistake. And so if you write guidelines, in the future, Doug, just bear that in mind. And one of specific consequence is not so much stylistically, but form-wise. Over on West Main was a building, a gap, a building, a gap, a building, a gap. And so they each almost need to speak their own little story. And so borrowing on their really wonderful, kudos to you guys, logo and brand colors. So in the first, I'm going to kind of build this one up. In the first is we're just going to do something real simple. And so again, borrowing this whole notion of a wainscot, that's the blue of their logo, that's the red of the logo, and then this is the purple of their logo. What we want to do is not only anchor the building to the building, but also just kind of give these windows a place to rest. Okay, it's, if you will, it's sort of a windowsill. And then up at the top, it's the lintel that connects the windows. And then I think in your case, I would also encourage you to do a painted sign on the stucco, just aside. But here's what I would really encourage you to do. Is when you look up very close, they've got this nice, I don't even know how you want to describe your logo, your icon, but I want to celebrate it with what I call super graphics and let it just make a big, bold statement on the side of the building. And I think it would be kind of an eye-catching motif, and so that's what I'd recommend for the print style. Sherry and her staff, okay, I've got good news and bad news. I was able to do phase 1, but don't worry, I promise afterwards I'll follow up phase 2. As a matter of fact, Mr. Bunch, I have bad news for you too. We ran out of time to do your coffee shop. But all you need to do is ask this sweet young lady, Sarah, to request a rendering of me, and we'll get you one as well, okay? So, but my sincere apologies. So here's the issue with Taylor's on Main. You guys recognize it more than anybody. It was not designed originally as a women's boutique clothing store. And so as a result, they're having a hard time with people seeing their merchandise and even recognizing when they're open. And so in phase 1, which is the only thing we had time to show this, is exterior treatments we can do to try to highlight the fact that it's open and display the merchandise. And so we'll walk through this. And so the first thing is, in this area that's currently dirt in between these planters, we want to go ahead and put some brick pavers. And then there's a little concrete octagon, paint something ornamental. I would definitely encourage you in your instance, just like, what's his business name? Orbits, thank you. Go ahead and put an ornamental sign pole, and then take your previous projecting sign that was here, which unfortunately was just, if I can be blunt, it was just too small. You just can't read it. So take that one, and put it down here where with a pedestrian you can certainly see that. And then in this place, put a more appropriately scaled panel sign that the passing motorist can read at how many miles an hour do you want them to go, Chief?
25.
25 miles an hour. There you go.
No more.
And then in these planters, let's definitely put. And by the way, Hurricane Matthew, I understand they used to have beautiful flowers. Hurricane Matthew took them away. Let's put them back. And then put a sandwich board out here and then some merchandise. And that's the best we could do in phase 1. In phase 2, what I'll give you later is when you can sweet talk all your husbands, you can rip out this existing storefront and put one in that would be more appropriate to display merchandise. And the last thing I would encourage you to do is actually put a true canopy that's just, thank you, that's just spins out. But I'll do a rendering for you so you can actually see it. So, but thank you for your patience in being able to do it that far.
Okay. Last site, I promised, and then Randy's got some renderings to show you. Whoops, sorry. And we should be able to get you home a little shot at midnight. I hope that's not a problem. But this is the Unity Park area. Obviously right up here in downtown on Main Street. The park itself sits in the corner. What we heard, and obviously we're looking at all this land, but what we heard was the interest in having a park space that wasn't necessarily recreation. It was more for gathering, what a lot of people would refer to more as a town green or a town square. Things you could have concerts, events, those kind of things you could relax in, etc. So we took a look at this block as a whole, and it's a large area, which we felt offered a lot of other opportunities than just green space. We think it's a good opportunity to tie back some of the things that Tripp mentioned earlier with new development, particularly if there are opportunities for downtown housing that aren't your traditional, say, single-family or townhome type units into pieces that would layer upwards. So we developed a plan, and I'll go through this real quickly, and then Randy can embellish it with some photo renderings that he has done. Here's the current Unity Park Square that would remain. But what we've done is we've relocated that parking that will happen in some phasing, that just hold that thought, to expand a green area that would extend back, give you an ample space. Right now the bandstand sits right here. It could remain there, it could relocate, but it starts to set up that area where we can do those events and program things that aren't necessarily recreation related. Coupled with that is we've opened up an area that now has an infill development site that fronts on the park, which is always good, and also starts to anchor the vacant site, the recently vacant site that's on Main Street. Hand in hand is we see Heatley Street as an opportunity longer term to start to create more development edge, to build it downtown, and potentially introduce some more residential-based uses. Obviously, that requires some parking. We've introduced some parking in the middle of the block, tried to save some of the large trees that are out there, which creates a nice buffer between these types of uses. And then taking that layer further is we have some things and some ideas that start to animate that space, pool restaurant uses, seating, those kinds of activities that build the energy and start to give the life and vitality to the park space. And with that, I will let Randy show you some more visuals.
Well, first of all, I think everybody knows where we are. Unity Park is to the left. This is the current City Trends building. And so when you see the fact that we've proposed some new uses for City Trends, please understand, we understand they're in the building. As Tripp alludes to, that they typically and often would prefer to be in more of a commercial strip opportunity. So it may be something where you want to take a look at some land swaps. But the proposal, first of all, as Andy alluded to, is to change the configuration. And instead of it being one big building that's deep that is only accessed in the front, we actually turn the building sideways, if you will, and you introduce 4 or 5 smaller bays that front and face onto the park itself. The technical word is micro retail. A lot of startup businesses, they can't afford the rent of a massive 30-foot wide by 100-foot deep building, but they can afford one that's 25 by 30. And so that's the notion. And what we're representing here is, you got a traditional door, but a garage door that you can roll up. And so whether it's a maker's mark, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's obviously the coffee shop, which is behind us, a furniture maker, just anything that you can think of. Now we've created these small micro retail opportunities that occupy this one big space. Hopefully they graduate and they move into larger spaces in the downtown. What I wanted to show in 2 phases was this. First of all, we don't have to immediately change this investment that you've made into this drive, into this parking area can stay, but let me just go ahead and show over some animation, so you could put in food trucks, some, vendors, craft shows or whatever, so you can still use that for that use. These bollards would simply be on sleeves that could be removed to get people in and out and to block it from total traffic. But in the long run, as Andy's plan alluded to, we'd love to see the entire area taken over, and now you really have that sort of quintessential town green in the heart of your main street downtown. And so it's not only do you have the activity from the businesses flooding out into the park, but you also have activity within the park itself. But I really like, Andy, where you located the gazebo and the sound stage. I thought it was a really good.
It's all about how you want to use the space. Because right now we would sort of sit in the lawn, but there's no reason it can't move around, be oriented at a different angle. Very flexible.
And again, just to prove my point about the problem with painting buildings white, is just how glaring it is. And so before and proposed after. So now we'll turn it over to Tripp, talk about the next steps.
So you've seen a lot tonight. We've gone a little bit over. We'd love to hear sort of the next steps. This is the result of 3 days of work. I think you can see these guys worked awfully hard over the past 3 days. We certainly want to get feedback from you, questions and comments. We'll be doing a debrief with the city, and then we'll be taking both the input that you provide and the debrief with the city and going in and doing refinement. And then we'll be returning here to Moncks Corner to work on, because what you've seen tonight is just a big sort of dump of information. We've got to turn this into what is a 1 year priority, what is a 2 year priority, what's more of a 5 year time horizon, how do we fund this project, what does the private sector role play, what does the public sector role play, and looking at that in an incremental way. So you've seen a lot tonight, but what we've got to make sure is that we have an implementation strategy that makes sense, that leverages investment, and makes that sort of perform in the long run for the community. So with that, I'm going to take any questions or comments that you might have. The team's on standby. I may deflect over to them. And then also we'll stick around a little bit afterwards as you mull about to answer any questions if you just want to buttonhole us and ask us a question as well. But any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Threw a lot out. How feasible is it is my next question.
Right.
So I would like to be a fly on the wall to see
Sure.
what the next steps are.
Yes, and absolutely. I think that's important, it's imperative. A lot